They called it the last auction before the snows came, and you could taste winter on the Colorado wind. Sunlight danced over the faded boards of the old ranch arena, dust swirling like ghosts beneath the boots of ranchers and the sharp eyes of buyers with big dreams and bigger wallets. In the middle of all this, lost in the shuffle of cattlemen and cowboy hats, stood Emily Reyes, 17, hands shoved deep into her jean pockets, heart pounding for reasons she didn't dare say out loud. Emily was never supposed to be here, not after everything her family had lost. But something had pulled her out of bed at dawn, some restless hope that she could find more than trouble in this place of bargains and broken promises. That hope had a name, though she didn't know it yet. Lightning. The colt didn't look like much. Short-legged, chestnut brown, a jagged scar tracing down his flank like the memory of old pain. Other horses stamped, tossed their manes, strutted their pedigrees and power. Not him. He just watched, quiet as a secret, letting the world pass him by. When the auctioneer's voice thundered for attention, the crowd's laughter buzzed sharp as a saw. Next up, this little guy, barely 2, don't know what you'd do with him. The man's grin was wide, but his eyes were tired. Start the bidding at $50. Anyone? 50? No one moved. A couple of ranch hands snickered. An old man in the back coughed. Emily's heart hammered. $50 was all she had. She'd saved it from odd jobs, helping her mom, raking leaves, tutoring local kids at school. It was supposed to help with groceries, maybe stretch toward the electricity bill. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. We can't afford hope, Emily, not right now. But hope was all she had. She raised her hand, heads turned. A couple of boys nudged each other, grinning. Emily felt her face burn, but she kept her chin up. The auctioneer blinked, then grinned wider. We have 50. Any more? No. Going once. Going twice. Sold. To the brave lady up front. The gavel cracked down. The crowd's laughter grew, bouncing around the arena like rubber balls. Emily didn't care, not even as someone whispered, wasting her money. Or when a woman said, that horse is more trouble than it's worth. She handed over her bills, her hands trembling as she clutched the battered lead rope. The colt looked at her, dark eyes calm and patient, as if he'd seen it all before and didn't mind seeing it again. Hi, she whispered. You're mine now. Guess we're both a little out of place, huh? The ride home was quieter than the auction. Emily sat in the back of the old pickup, arms wrapped around herself, watching the scenery blur by. Bare cottonwoods, fence posts leaning from years of wind. The colt rode in the battered trailer, the only sound his occasional stomp or snort. When they rattled up the gravel driveway, her mom was waiting on the porch, arms crossed, face set like stone. Nico, her little brother, hung back near the barn, eyes wide with curiosity and dread. Her mother didn't say anything at first, just looked at the trailer, then at Emily. The silence was heavy, pressed down by all the things they couldn't say. Emily tried to find her voice, and Mom, that was the bill money, Em. The bill money, her mother snapped, each word sharp and bright as a shattered plate. We needed that to keep the lights on. Why would you do this? Emily glanced at Nico, who looked like he wanted to disappear into his jacket. She swallowed hard, words coming out shaky, but true. He needed someone. I think he's got more to give. If you just give him a chance. If you just give me a chance. Her mother looked away, lips pressed tight. We can't afford chances. Emily tried to steady her breathing as she led the colt out of the trailer. His hooves clattered softly on the ramp. Nico crept closer, eyes darting between the horse and his sister. What's his name? Nico asked, voice small but hopeful. Emily knelt, touching just the colt's muzzle. His nose was soft, whiskers tickling her fingers. Lightning, she said, the name coming to her like a prayer. His name is Lightning. Nico smiled, the first smile Emily had seen in days. For a moment, she let herself believe things could change. Later that night, when the world was quiet and her mother's anger had faded to silence, Emily snuck out to the barn. Lightning stood alone in his stall, ears flicking at the sounds of mice in the hayloft. Emily leaned against the door, letting her head rest on the rough wood. "I know, it doesn't make sense," she whispered, voice trembling. "But you're not a mistake. I believe in you. Maybe someday they'll believe too." Lightning blinked, then pressed his nose gently against her hand. Emily felt something shift, something small but real. The start of something new. The next morning, the town's gossip mill was already churning. At the feed store, Mrs. Ramirez shook her head. "Did you hear about the Reyes girl? Spent $50 on a lame horse. Ah, shame. That family used to have pride." At school, Emily caught whispers as she passed. "Emily's gone crazy, wasting her time, just like her dad." But Emily kept her head high. She walked home through the autumn dust, boots kicking up little storms. When she reached the ranch, she found Nico waiting by the barn, a hopeful glint in his eyes. Can I help?" he asked, voice shaky but brave. Emily smiled, ruffling his hair. "You can be my assistant." Together, they fed Lightning, brushed out the tangles in his coat, tried to patch up the old saddle. Emily watched the way Lightning moved, awkward at first, but willing. She saw the way he listened, the way he didn't flinch when Nico laughed too loud. That night, as the sun bled out behind the mountains and the world grew quiet again, Emily sat by Lightning's stall, her fingers tracing the scar along his side. "They said you weren't worth it," she murmured. "But they don't see what I see. You just need someone to believe." As the stars pricked the sky, Lightning dozed with his head on Emily's knee. In that barn, with the scent of hay and hope thick in the air, Emily made a silent promise. To herself, to her family, to the cult no one wanted. She would prove them all wrong. The sun was barely up, painting the Colorado sky a streaky orange, when Emily dragged herself out of bed. She'd barely slept. All night she'd wrestled with guilt and hope. Her mother's furious words echoing in her head, Nico's eager eyes, the quiet comfort of Lightning's breath in the barn. She knew what waited for her that morning. Chores, silence, and the ever-present weight of a ranch on the brink. The kitchen was silent, except for the soft sputter of the old coffee maker. Her mom sat at the table, her face creased and pale in the early light. She didn't look up as Emily came in, just pushed a plate of toast across the table without a word. It was a small gesture, but Emily took it for what it was. A truce. Or maybe just exhaustion. After breakfast, Emily pulled on her oldest boots and her dad's faded jacket and stepped out into the brittle cold. Frost glazed the paddock rails, and the fields beyond looked empty, except for the rusty tractor that hadn't started in months. There were fewer cattle than last year, and sometimes Emily swore you could hear the silence between their slow, hungry calls. She made her way to the barn, boots crunching on gravel. Lightning stood in his stall, watching her with those patient eyes. He'd eaten most of the hay Nico had given him last night, but he looked restless, ears flicking, hooves shifting, as if he sensed he was in a place that didn't want him yet. "Morning, Lightning," Emily murmured, brushing the shavings from his back. He snorted, nose twitching against her arm. She ran her fingers through his mane, untangling knots, as the barn filled with weak sunlight. Her little brother Nico came bounding in, his hair sticking up like a bird's nest. He carried a bucket of water in both hands, spilling half of it along the way. "He needs more hay, Em. And look, I cleaned the feed bucket." Emily smiled, feeling some of her tension melt away. "You're the best ranch hand I've got." "Little man." Nico grinned and puffed out his chest. "Mom says I gotta help. She's still mad, but she said if you can feed him with your own money, you can try training him. Just don't expect her to pay for feed or the vet." Emily felt a knot loosen inside her. It wasn't approval, but it wasn't a hard no either. She'd take what she could get. The morning slipped away as Emily and Nico cleaned stalls and patched fences. All the while, Emily's mind raced with plans. Lightning wasn't just a stray horse anymore. He was her chance to prove something to herself, to her family, to everyone who thought she was wasting her life. But with the ranch one bad week away from foreclosure, every risk felt sharper, more dangerous. By noon, a dusty wind whipped across the field, carrying with it the sound of a pickup truck crunching down the driveway. Emily wiped sweat from her brow and watched as her mom's friend, Mrs. Callahan, pulled up. She stepped out, arms full of feed bags and her eyes sharp as ever. "I heard you got yourself a new project, Emily," she called, her voice echoing across the yard. $50 for a colt, huh? You planning on making him into a racehorse? Or is he just another mouth to feed? Emily flushed, but she stood her ground. He's more than he looks. I just need time. Mrs. Callahan raised an eyebrow. Time? And a miracle. Well, I brought you some cracked corn and oats. Lord knows you'll need it if you're fixing to train that one. Emily took the feed with a grateful nod. She watched as Mrs. Callahan wandered off, whispering with her mom near the porch. Even from a distance, Emily could see her mom's tense shoulders the way she kept shaking her head. She knew what they were saying. About wasted money, lost hope, foolish dreams. As the days rolled on, Emily threw herself into caring for Lightning. She dug out her dad's old training books, their pages yellow and soft from years of use. She made lists, feed schedules, tack repairs, things to buy if she ever found extra cash. The ranch itself seemed to groan beneath the effort, fences sagging, the roof of the hay barn leaking after every rain. Emily's mom worked double shifts at the diner in town, her hands red and cracked, her eyes always tired. One evening, as Emily led Lightning around the dusty paddock, she noticed a group of local kids riding their bikes along the fence line. They stopped, watching her with amused, skeptical faces. Among them was Jonah Parks, the quarterback's cousin and king of small-town gossip. "Hey, Emily," Jonah shouted, barely holding back a grin. "That the famous $50 wonder? You gonna race him in the state fair? Or maybe the donkey derby?" The others snickered, and Emily felt her cheeks burn. She straightened, fixing Jonah with a glare. "Just watch. Someday, you'll wish you'd bet on him." "Sure thing," Jonah called, pedaling off with his friends. "I'll save you a spot in last place." Emily turned back to Lightning, trying to push away the sting. She stroked his neck, whispering, "Ignore them. We'll show them. We'll show all of them." Later that night, as the family sat around the chipped kitchen table eating canned soup, Nico brought out a sketch he'd made. It was a rough drawing, Lightning with a cape, racing across the field, Emily perched heroically on his back. "Oh, you're gonna win," Nico said, pushing the picture across the table. Emily laughed, ruffling his hair. "You really think so?" "I know so," he insisted. "You just have to believe it, Em." Their mom glanced over, her expression softening just a little. "Just make sure you get your chores done first, all right?" After dinner, Emily snuck back out to the barn. The sky was velvet black, shot through with stars. She leaned on the gate, watching Lightning doze in his stall, chest rising and falling in the gentle dark. "They all think I'm crazy," she whispered, "but I believe in you. I believe in us." Lightning twitched his ears, turning his head as if he understood. Emily reached through the slats, scratching his nose. The next morning, the real work began. Emily and Nico built a makeshift track in the back pasture. Just a rough loop, marked by old tires and feed buckets. Emily borrowed a pair of hand-me-down boots from Mrs. Callahan, patched the worn saddle with duct tape and hope, and started Lightning's training. Every lap was a lesson in patience. Sometimes Lightning balked or spooked at shadows. Sometimes he just stood there, stubborn as a mule, until Emily coaxed him forward with promises and treats. Through it all, Emily felt something building, a fragile thread of trust stretching between her and the colt, growing stronger with each dusty step. One evening, after another long, frustrating training session, Emily sat in the dirt, boots kicked off, Lightning grazing quietly nearby. Nico dropped down beside her, his jeans smeared with grass stains. "Do you really think he can win?" he asked softly. Emily looked at Lightning, at the rough edges and old scars, and smiled. "I don't know if he'll ever win a blue ribbon, but I know he won't quit, and neither will I." Nico nodded, leaning against her shoulder. In the fading light, with the world quiet around them, Emily realized what she'd really bought for $50 wasn't just a horse. It was a chance to believe again, even when everything felt broken. And she was going to fight for it, no matter how many people left, no matter how many times she failed. This was her dream. This was their dream, and it wasn't over yet. Training Lightning was never going to be easy. Emily knew it that first morning as she tightened the ancient girth strap and saw the hesitation in the colt's eyes. Lightning was still raw, unshaped by any real training, quick to shy from unfamiliar hands. But Emily had learned a thing or two about patience from watching her father work cattle, and about grit from watching her mother patch together their lives after he was gone. The early autumn mornings started before sunrise, when the world was still blue and cold, and the only sounds were the sleepy calls of birds and the crunch of Emily's boots across the yard. She'd greet Lightning with an apple slice or a handful of oats, murmuring encouragement as she slipped on his faded halter. The old ranch, nearly bankrupt and rough around the edges, became their training ground. Fields turned into makeshift tracks, rusted barrels set up as weaving obstacles. Nico was there for every practice, eager and loyal, dragging out buckets of water and sometimes narrating the race like a real announcer. "Here they come, Lightning and Emily, the underdogs of Cedar Creek," he'd call, waving an imaginary flag. Emily couldn't help but laugh, even when her arms ached and her boots filled with dirt. But outside their little team, the world was less kind. Sometimes the neighbors passing on the road would slow their trucks to watch, smirks playing at their lips. Rumors and jokes floated through town about the girl who spent the bill money on a broken-down mule, about the Reyes family trying to recapture Old Glory. At the feed store, Emily would overhear women whispering, "Maybe she thinks she's going to save the ranch with that thing." It stung, but she'd learned how to swallow those words and keep working. The hardest part was Lightning himself. For the first week, every new command felt like an argument. Emily tried gentle tugs, then firmer signals. Her patience sometimes wore thin, but she never raised her voice. Lightning shied at the sound of cars, or the sudden snap of a tarp in the wind. Some days he'd balk and refuse to move. Other times he'd take off at a wild canter and leave Emily clinging to the saddle for dear life. Nico would cheer her on, or wince in sympathy, depending on how things went. One afternoon, as they circled the track, for the dozenth time, a cloud of dust rising behind them, a sleek black pickup rolled down the lane. Emily tensed, recognizing the truck before she saw the man behind the wheel. Victor Langston, one of the wealthiest breeders in the county, owned a spread so big you could get lost in it. He was famous for his show horses, his money, and the way he always seemed to look down on anyone with less. Victor eased his truck to a stop beside the fence, sunglasses glinting, and watched in silence for a moment. His own horse, a tall, shining bay with perfect lines, stood in the back, tossing its head. Emily could feel Victor's gaze on her, cold and amused. After a moment, Victor called out, "Is that the new champion I've been hearing about?" Emily's grip tightened on the reins. "His name's Lightning." Victor snorted. "More like Thunder's shadow." His gaze swept the ragged tack, the patched saddle, the skinny colt. "You know, my offer still stands, Emily. There's work at my barn. You'd learn more than you ever will out here, and you wouldn't have to risk your neck on that. Well, whatever that is." Emily straightened in the saddle, her pride flaring. "Thanks, but we're just fine." Victor's grin turned sharp. "Suit yourself. But that little mule won't make it to the first bend if you try to run him at Grand Mesa. Trust me." With a dismissive wave, he gunned the engine and drove off, gravel spraying in his wake. Nico stared after him, his brow furrowed. "Don't listen to him, Em. He's just scared you'll win. Emily smiled, though her stomach twisted with doubt. Maybe. Or maybe he just can't imagine someone like us winning at all? But those words, that little mule won't make it to the first bend, echoed in her mind that night as she brushed Lightning down and fed him by hand. She saw all the places he was still rough, all the gaps in his training, and wondered if she was asking too much of him, of herself. The next day, the doubts grew heavier. It was a bad morning. Lightning balked at the barrel pattern, reared when Emily tried to guide him through the tight turn, and refused the jump Nico had set up with 2 hay bales and an old plank. Emily landed hard in the dirt, biting back tears of frustration as Lightning trotted off, looking almost smug. Nico rushed over, wide-eyed. "Are you okay?" Emily dusted herself off, wincing. "I'm fine. Just stubborn, that's all." She glared at Lightning, who stood at the far end of the paddock, chewing on weeds. By late afternoon, Emily sat on the fence, head in her hands. Every muscle ached. Doubts crowded in. About the money, the family, whether she was being selfish trying to keep a dream alive that should have been left behind with her father's old tack. Just then, her best friend Piper showed up, swinging her battered bike into the driveway. Piper was tall and freckled, always wearing boots 2 sizes too big, and a baseball cap turned backward. She flopped down beside Emily and offered a can of root beer. "Heard Victor stopped by to gloat," Piper said, rolling her eyes. "Ignore him. Everyone knows he cheats anyway." Emily snorted, sipping the soda. "I wish it was just Victor. The whole town thinks I'm crazy." Piper grinned. "They thought I was crazy when I wore a suit to prom, too. Sometimes you gotta be crazy to do something different." They sat in silence, listening to the crickets. Piper's older brother, Ethan, drove up a few minutes later, toolbox in hand. "I can take a look at that saddle for you," he offered. "And if you ever need someone to co-sign for the race entry, let me know. The board trusts me, more or less." Emily blinked in surprise. "You'd really do that?" Ethan shrugged. "You and Lightning are the best thing to happen around here in months. I'd bet on you two any day." That night, Emily went back to the barn, feeling a new flicker of hope. She found Lightning lying in the straw, his big eyes watching her. She knelt beside him, whispering, "They're all watching, boy, waiting for us to fall. But we're not going to, not if we stick together." Lightning nuzzled her shoulder. Emily smiled, letting her worries fade into the quiet dark. Training would never be easy. Nothing worth fighting for ever was. But somewhere between the dust and the doubt, a bond was growing. Slow, fragile, but real, and Emily knew, in her heart, that was enough. For now. Word traveled fast in small towns. By the end of the week, just about everyone in Cedar Creek knew Emily Reyes was planning to enter the Grand Mesa Open Run with her $50 Wonder. Emily could feel the weight of their eyes every time she took Lightning out to train. At the feed store, in church, and even at school, where Snickers followed her through the halls. It would have been easy to let the whispers eat away at her confidence, but Emily had learned something these last weeks. Belief had to start from within, out in the fields, under a sky wide and blue. Emily doubled down on her training. She worked Lightning on their homemade track, circling again and again, teaching him to respond to the lightest touch. She used her hands less and her voice more. Soft whistles, clucks of her tongue, a gentle tug on the rope or a tap of her heel. At first, Lightning's responses were inconsistent, sometimes eager, sometimes distracted, sometimes wary. But with each passing day, something subtle began to change. Lightning started to anticipate her signals. He would angle his ears back, waiting for the next cue, and pivot just before she asked. If she shifted in the saddle or leaned a little, he responded, turning, stopping, or starting again as if they shared a language only they could understand. Sometimes, after a good session, Emily would hop off, and Lightning would follow her around the paddock, close enough that she could feel his warm breath on her arm. It felt like magic, like trust, earned one patient minute at a time, but not everyone could see what Emily saw. One chilly Saturday, Emily's best friend Piper biked out from town with a bag of bagels and her usual boundless enthusiasm. She found Emily lunging lightning in wide, controlled circles. Piper perched on the fence, munching on her breakfast, and whistled. "He's starting to look like a real athlete, Em." Emily grinned, feeling a swell of pride. "He's getting there. I think he's almost ready." Piper tossed her a bagel. "You entering him in the open run for real?" "Yeah, if I can get all the paperwork sorted." Emily hesitated, looking over at the little pile of forms she'd stuffed in her jacket pocket. It's expensive, and they need a co-signer. Mom's not an option." Piper shrugged, already pulling out her phone. "My brother owes you a favor. He'll sign." A few minutes later, Ethan arrived, driving his battered truck up the lane. He reviewed the forms with an exaggerated sense of seriousness, then scrawled his signature at the bottom. "There, and now you're official." Emily's little brother, Nico, hovered at the barn door, watching the whole process with wide-eyed excitement. He'd become her #1 supporter, polishing her boots every night, making up new cheers for her and Lightning, and even taping up a "Good luck, Em" and Lightning sign on the old fence by the track. Emily tried not to notice that the sign was painted on the back of one of their last unused feed sacks. As race day crept closer, the whispers in town only grew. Some folks were openly skeptical. Others just watched with a mix of amusement and pity. One afternoon, Emily overheard a couple of women at the gas station. "Did you hear? That Reyes girl is really going to race that horse. Bless her heart. I hope she doesn't get hurt." Back at home, Emily pushed past the doubts, focusing on what mattered: the work, the bond, the belief. She noticed that Lightning had stopped shying at passing cars, that he no longer balked at the barrel pattern, and that, if she closed her eyes, she could almost predict his next move. She started running drills with a stopwatch, timing each lap and marking their progress on an old chalkboard tacked to the barn wall. Every second they shaved off felt like a tiny victory. Nico threw himself into helping too. He cleaned Lightning's hooves, filled water buckets, and found creative ways to fix old gear, using duct tape, rope, and the occasional borrowed tool from the neighbor's garage. Some nights, the three of them, Emily, Nico, and Piper, would collapse in the hayloft, swapping stories and laughing at how far Lightning had come. It was the happiest Emily had felt in years. One evening, as a storm rolled over the mountains, Emily sat alone in the barn, brushing Lightning's coat by lantern light. She could hear the rain hammering on the tin roof, but inside it was warm and peaceful. Lightning nuzzled her shoulder, breathing soft and steady. "I wish Dad could see us now," Emily whispered, running her fingers through Lightning's tangled mane. "He always said you can't teach heart, but I think you've got more heart than any horse I've ever met." Lightning turned and pressed his nose into her hand. For a long, quiet moment, Emily felt like they were the only two beings in the world. The next day, Emily filled out the race entry with trembling hands, tucked the forms into an envelope, and mailed them at the post office on her way to school. As she walked through town, she caught Victor Langston and his crew leaning against the wall outside the diner, watching her with thinly veiled amusement. "Hey, Reyes," Victor called. "You're really going to embarrass yourself at Grand Mesa?" Emily kept walking, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. But later that day, when she was grooming Lightning, Piper appeared in the doorway, looking more serious than usual. You know Victor's betting against you, right? He's got half the town convinced you'll get disqualified or break your neck out there." Emily shook her head. "Let him talk. He'll see." On the eve of the Grand Mesa Open Run, Emily, Nico, and Piper stayed up late in the barn, prepping gear and laying out her old riding clothes. Nico polished Emily's boots until they shone, and Piper mended her gloves with neat little stitches. When the work was done, Emily knelt beside Lightning's stall, pressing her forehead to his. "They're all waiting for us to fail, boy, but they don't know what we can do." Lightning stared at her, calm and steady. Emily felt a wave of determination, stronger than fear. As dawn crept over the horizon, the little ranch hummed with anticipation. Emily's mom appeared in the doorway, a tired smile flickering across her face. "Good luck, Em," she said quietly. "No matter what happens, I'm proud of you." It was all Emily needed to hear. She saddled Lightning, heart pounding, and led him out into the cold, bright morning. Piper gave her a pep talk. Ethan checked the trailer hitch twice, and Nico ran around collecting last-minute gear. As they pulled out onto the highway, Emily glanced back at the ranch. For the first time in a long time, she didn't see only what was broken. She saw possibility, shimmering like sunlight on the dew. In her heart, she knew. Lightning was ready. And so was she. The air at Grand Mesa Fairgrounds buzzed with excitement and nerves. Horses snorted and pawed the ground. Trailers lined the dirt lots, and people hustled everywhere, all prepping for the biggest event in the valley. Emily stepped out of Piper's old truck, heart thumping as she watched seasoned riders in sharp uniforms, walking their horses in perfect circles. For a moment, she felt small, invisible. Just a kid with a $50 colt, outnumbered by money and pedigree. Lightning, as always, was calm. He looked around, flicking his ears at the sounds and scents, as if taking stock of the competition. Emily drew strength from that steady gaze. She led him to the stall assigned to them, ignoring the sideways glances from riders and parents who sized her up with skepticism or thinly veiled amusement. Piper, ever the optimist, clapped Emily on the shoulder. "You got this. Everyone's nervous before their first big run." Piper's brother Ethan helped unload the tack, offering a few last-minute tips before heading over to the official's tent to check the entries paperwork. But behind the clatter and cheer of the fairgrounds, darker things were brewing. Emily noticed Victor Langston walking the grounds, always surrounded by handlers in matching jackets, their horses gleaming like they'd stepped out of a commercial. Victor's eyes found Emily and Lightning. He smirked. "Hope your little mule's up for a real race, Reyes." Emily just nodded, not letting Victor's sneers shake her. Piper made a face behind his back and whispered, "Ignore him. He's just scared you'll make him look bad." But Piper's confidence couldn't silence the growing tension in Emily's gut. She focused on brushing Lightning's coat, checking the old saddle for new tears, running through her checklist over and over to keep her nerves at bay. As the sun dipped behind the mountains and shadows crept over the fairgrounds, Emily and Piper walked Lightning to a quiet patch of grass to cool down after a practice run. The evening air was brisk, laced with the scent of hay and barbecue. Emily's mom had managed to get off work early and had brought Nico, who practically vibrated with excitement, peppering Emily with questions about the other horses in the course. Do you think Lightning's nervous?" Nico asked, his eyes wide as he stroked the horse's neck. Emily smiled, hiding her own nerves. "Not as nervous as I am," Nico grinned. "He'll be fine. He's got Joe." Night fell, and the fairgrounds emptied out, leaving only the night crew and the occasional echo of laughter. Emily tucked Lightning in for the night, gave him an extra handful of oats, and double-checked the latch on his stall. She was just about to head back to the trailer when Piper caught her arm. Hey, did you see that guy?" Piper nodded toward the far side of the barn, where a handler in Victor's colors was hovering, trying to look busy but glancing over at Lightning's stall more than once. Emily frowned. "Probably just making sure everything's locked up." But long after Emily had crawled into her sleeping bag in the trailer, Piper's words echoed in her head. The next morning, Emily woke to a strange silence. She hurried out to the barn and found Lightning sweating and breathing hard, his coat damp, his eyes duller than she'd ever seen. For one terrifying moment, she thought he was colicking. Panic surged through her. "Nico, get Mom!" she shouted. Within minutes, the little stall was crowded. The event's on-call vet arrived quickly, taking Lightning's temperature, listening to his heart, and asking a stream of questions. "Was he like this last night?" the vet asked, concern etched into her features. Emily shook her head. "He was fine. A little tired, but nothing like this." The vet checked Lightning's water bucket and sniffed it. Her eyes narrowed. "Has anyone else had access to your horse since last night?" Emily blinked, the pieces sliding into place. That handler, the odd glances. I don't know. Maybe." Piper appeared, eyes blazing. "I saw Victor's guy hanging around here last night. He left in a hurry when he saw me coming." Emily felt sick. Sabotage wasn't just a story people told, it was happening right here. But who would believe her, a girl with no money or clout, over someone like Victor Langston? The vet offered her advice. "He's showing signs of mild suppressant poisoning. It isn't life-threatening, but it'll slow him down. He'll need plenty of water and rest. If he's up for it, he can still run tomorrow, but you need to keep an eye on him." Emily nodded, fury and fear warring in her chest. "Thank you." As soon as the vet left, Piper grabbed Emily by the arm. "We need to tell someone. This isn't right." Emily hesitated. If she made a formal complaint and was wrong, she'd be branded a sore loser, maybe even disqualified. But if she did nothing, Victor might get away with it, and Lightning would have to race, weakened and hurt, because of someone else's cowardice. That evening, Lightning seemed a little better after hours of careful care and coaxing water into him. Emily and Piper took turns sitting with him, refusing to leave him alone. Piper watched every stranger who walked by, shooting glares at anyone who lingered too long. Nico made a sign and hung it on Lightning's stall. "Please do not feed. Training in progress." Emily tried to smile for his sake, but her mind raced, looping over the scene again and again. She wanted to believe in fairness, in the honor of sport, but the world kept proving otherwise. She remembered her father's words, "Trust is earned, but suspicion keeps you alive." Late that night, Emily dozed in a folding chair outside Lightning's stall. Piper nudged her awake, just as she saw a shadow flicker by the far end of the barn. Emily shot up, grabbing her flashlight and slipping into the alleyway. She caught a glimpse of movement, someone ducking behind a stack of hay bales. Emily's heart hammered as she crept closer. Suddenly, Piper let out a sharp whistle, startling the figure, who bolted for the exit. Emily's flashlight caught a flash of Victor's ranch jacket as the figure disappeared into the night. "Ha! Did you see that?" Piper hissed. Emily nodded, anger flaring hot. "That's twice. They're not going to stop unless we make them." Piper crossed her arms. "Let's get through the race first, then we tell the board everything." Emily sank to her knees beside Lightning, feeling the horse's warm breath on her hand. "You don't deserve this," she whispered. "None of it." Lightning flicked an ear, and for the first time since dawn, Emily saw a spark of his old self, a flash in his eyes, a twitch in his neck, the will to fight through whatever came next. "I promise. We'll make them see," Emily murmured as the barn creaked and settled around them. Dawn would come soon, and with it, the biggest test Lightning and Emily had ever faced. Not just the race, but the fight for fairness, for respect, for a chance to prove that heart mattered more than anything Victor Langston could buy or sabotage in the shadows. The Grand Mesa open run dawned beneath a bruised purple sky, the mountain air so cold it stung Emily's lungs. The fairgrounds came alive before sunrise, lights flickering on, horses whinnying, and handlers bustling between rows of stalls. Emily felt the day's weight pressing down on her as she forced herself out of her sleeping bag in the trailer. Her hands trembled with nerves and exhaustion. She'd barely slept, jumping at every creak and whisper from the barn. She rushed to Lightning's stall, where Piper was already waiting, face drawn with worry. "He's been up and down all night," Piper whispered. "Breathing's better, but he's still not himself." Emily ran her hands along Lightning's neck, feeling the warmth of his skin, searching his eyes for a sign that he was okay. Lightning nuzzled her palm, but stood a little too still, as if saving energy for a storm ahead. Nico appeared, sleepy but eager, clutching Lightning's brush. "Can I help him?" he asked. Emily hugged her little brother and nodded. "Yeah, buddy. Today, we all help." They worked together in the dim light, Nico brushing Lightning's coat until it shone, Piper filling water buckets, and Emily checking and rechecking the tack for anything out of place. Every now and then, she caught Victor Langston's people watching, smirking as they passed. But this time, Emily didn't look away. She glared back, anger warming her fear. The vet stopped by for a final check, her face grave as she examined Lightning's gums and felt his pulse. He's dehydrated, but he's not in distress. He'll be slower than usual, but if you want to run him, I'll clear him. Emily stared at Lightning, her heart twisting. The other horses looked fierce and ready, sleek, powerful, untouchable. Lightning looked thin and worn, but in his eyes she saw something deeper. A stubborn, quiet willingness. Piper nudged her. "It's your call, Em. You can scratch him. Nobody would blame you." Emily shook her head, torn. The weight of the entire year, the bill money, the late nights, her family's doubts, Victor's sabotage, rested on this one choice. Her mother arrived at the barn just then, cheeks red from the cold, eyes soft with worry. "Emily," she began, voice trembling, "you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You hear me? If you want to walk away, I'll stand by you. No matter what." Emily blinked away tears. She turned to Lightning, pressing her forehead to his. "What do you think, boy?" she whispered. Lightning leaned into her, his breath warm, his eyes shining with that familiar, stubborn spark. It felt like a sign. She stood and squared her shoulders, looking at her family, Piper, and the small group of friends who had gathered in support. "He's willing, so I have to be, too." A hush fell over the group. Even Victor, watching from across the ring, paused for a moment, his smirk faltering. Emily suited up, slipping into her patched riding clothes and borrowed gloves. She walked Lightning to the holding area, the sound of her boots crunching on gravel echoing through her bones. The announcer's voice boomed across the fairgrounds, calling riders to their marks. She watched the other riders, some stretching, some whispering last-minute advice to their trainers, most ignoring the girl with the scarred chestnut colt and worn-out tack. Emily's hands trembled as she mounted Lightning, heart pounding in her chest. Piper squeezed her hand before she rode out. "No matter what. You did it, Em. You proved them all wrong." The starting gate loomed ahead, crowded with powerful horses and their confident riders. Emily took a deep breath and guided Lightning into place. The world shrank to the steady thud of Lightning's heartbeat, the cold leather under her hands, and the memory of her father's words. "It's not about beating everyone. It's about finishing the run you start." The seconds ticked down, the flag dropped, a gunshot split the air, and they were off. Lightning stumbled out of the gate, legs shaking, the fatigue obvious. The other horses surged ahead, pounding the track with thunderous hooves. But Emily sat deep in the saddle, her voice steady and calm. Easy, boy. Find your pace. We're not racing them. We're racing us." At first, they lagged. Victor's horse shot to the front, gleaming and proud. The crowd leaned in, most eyes already off Emily. But slowly, with each stride, Lightning found a rhythm. Emily kept her hands gentle, guiding with quiet signals, pressing her knees, shifting her weight, humming encouragements she'd whispered 1,000 times in the dark of the barn. The track was rougher than the fields at home. There were sharp bends and muddy patches. As they reached the first turn, another horse stumbled on a slick spot, nearly tossing its rider. Gasps rang out. Emily's heart jumped, but Lightning skirted the danger with a nimble hop, finding safe ground, ears pinned back in concentration. They rounded the second bend, Emily counting every breath. Ahead, Victor's handler had slowed, but Lightning pressed forward, growing stronger with every step. Piper and Nico screamed from the stands, their voices rising above the rest. Halfway through the run, Emily spotted Victor watching from the sidelines. His face was tense, his eyes calculating. She could almost feel his disbelief as Lightning, the broken colt, held his ground and started gaining on the pack. The pain in Lightning's stride was visible, but so was his determination. Emily's throat tightened with pride. Every lesson, every hour in the dust and cold had led to this. She pressed her heels in gently. "Just a little more, buddy. I know you can." Lightning pushed harder, rounding the final bend as sweat foamed on his neck. The crowd saw them now, no longer the joke, but the threat. Emily's breath came fast and shallow, her vision blurring with emotion. As they thundered toward the finish, another horse slipped, this time on a suspicious patch near the inside rail. The rider tumbled, unhurt but shaken. Officials ran to help. A murmur spread through the crowd about the possibility of foul play, and Emily's anger flared all over again. But there was no time for revenge, only the run. Lightning surged, giving every last ounce of strength. Emily guided him through the chaos, every movement in sync, horse and rider a single heart beating against the odds. They didn't cross the line first, but they crossed it together, heads high, spirits unbroken, the crowd erupting in applause for the most unexpected finish of the day. Emily slid off Lightning and threw her arms around his neck, tears streaming down her cheeks. Piper and Nico ran to her, shouting with joy, and even her mom rushed forward, hugging her tight. "He did it!" Nico screamed. "You both did!" Emily buried her face in Lightning's mane, whispering through her tears. "You did more than anyone ever expected, boy. More than they'll ever know." Behind her, Victor scowled, storming off toward the officials. But Emily didn't care. In that moment, under the cold mountain sun, she felt a victory that had nothing to do with first place. It was the victory of heart, of not giving in to fear or anger or sabotage, of finishing what they started, of believing in something so stubbornly, so fiercely, that the world had no choice but to notice. As Emily walked Lightning back to the barn, tired but glowing with pride, the announcer's voice echoed over the fairgrounds. "Give it up for Emily Reyes and Lightning. It's the heart of Grand Mesa. And for the first time, since this wild journey began, Emily felt truly seen. The cheers hadn't faded by the time Emily led Lightning off the track, her hands still shaking from the adrenaline and the release of fear. They had crossed the finish line, not first, but upright and proud, and for Emily, that was a kind of victory she'd never known before. Lightning was covered in sweat, his chestnut coat streaked with salt and dust, but he still arched his neck, eyes bright, ears pricked, looking more alive than ever. Emily pressed her face into his mane, barely hearing the voices around her. Nico jumped up and down beside them, waving both arms in the air, his shouts blending with the noise of the crowd. Piper caught up a second later, flinging her arms around Emily and nearly knocking her over. "You did it! Oh my God, Em, you two were amazing!" Emily smiled through tears, overwhelmed. She looked down at Lightning, who blew out a heavy breath, then nuzzled her arm. For a brief, golden moment, all the worries, the sabotage, the doubts, the weight of the world seemed to melt away in the warm applause of strangers. But even as she basked in the moment, a stir moved through the crowd. The fallen rider was being helped to his feet, and the officials were gathered in a tight huddle near the rail where the second horse had slipped. Emily caught snippets of urgent conversation. "Slick spot. Shouldn't have been there. Get the vet." Victor Langston paced the sidelines, his expression thunderous. He barked orders at his crew, gesturing angrily at the track and then at the judges' stand. For the first time since Emily had met him, he didn't look smug or sure. He looked scared. A few riders approached Emily, offering quiet congratulations. One, a girl named Savannah, who had always seemed out of reach with her perfect hair and expensive boots, touched Emily's shoulder. "You rode the hell out of that run. I didn't think Lightning had it in him. Guess you proved us all wrong." Emily blushed, surprised by the sincerity. Thanks. He did all the work." Savannah grinned. "Doesn't matter who did what. What matters is you didn't quit. That's real courage." As the official results were posted, Emily and Piper went to check their time. They'd finished solidly in the middle of the pack. A miracle, considering Lightning's rough start and his condition. That morning, Piper whooped, pointing at their names. "Middle of the board. Em, you should be so proud." Emily let herself feel that pride for a second before worry crept in again. She kept glancing over at Lightning, who stood quietly in his stall now, accepting treats from Nico. The vet had promised to check him over once things settled down. Just then, a fairgrounds official hurried up, clipboard in hand. "Emily Reyes?" She nodded, heart leaping. "We need to check Lightning for substances, just a routine spot test, nothing personal." Emily agreed, relief mixing with a sliver of fear. She knew she hadn't done anything wrong, but after everything that happened, she couldn't help but worry. Piper stood by her side as they led Lightning to the vet's station. The test was quick and efficient, the vet friendly but thorough. When it was done, the vet smiled at Emily. "He's a good horse. Tough, too. You take care of him." "All right. I will," Emily promised, rubbing Lightning's muzzle. Meanwhile, the buzz around the track only intensified. More rumors about foul play began to circulate. Too many horses stumbling in the same spot, too many odd accidents. Word got around that the race officials were looking into the possibility of tampering, and several riders mentioned seeing Victor's handlers near the track the night before. Emily was exhausted. She wanted nothing more than to collapse in the trailer and sleep for a week. But she knew this wasn't over. Piper stuck close, whispering encouragement and sharing every rumor she heard. "People are saying someone spilled something on the track," Piper said. "They think it was deliberate, and some folks are pointing fingers at Victor's crew. I wouldn't be surprised if the whole thing blows up by tomorrow." Emily looked at Lightning, her heart aching with worry and anger. He deserved better than this. They all did. Late that evening, after most of the riders had packed up and left, the vet returned with results. She found Emily, Piper, and Nico cleaning out Lightning's stall. "We finished the first round of tests," the vet said, voice low. "Lightning has traces of ethyl carbamate in his system, a banned suppressant, not enough to kill him, but enough to slow him down. I'm sorry, Emily." Emily's world spun. She steadied herself on the stall door. "He was sabotaged." "I knew it." The vet nodded. "I'll be reporting this to the racing board." "You should too?" Piper bristled with outrage. "Victor and his people. It has to be." Nico's eyes filled with tears. "Why would anyone do that to Lightning?" Emily knelt and hugged her brother. "Because they were scared of what we could do, and now the truth is out." Word spread quickly. By morning, local reporters had picked up the story. "A teen rider's horse targeted in Sabotage," flashed across small-town news sites, and Emily found herself answering questions from journalists, race officials, and concerned parents. Piper helped her keep her cool, while Ethan managed the calls to the racing board and the event organizers. Victor Langston, for his part, denied everything, but the evidence was mounting. Other riders recalled seeing Victor's handlers near the water buckets, and the suspicious patch on the track was quickly traced back to one of his crew members. The racing board opened a formal investigation. For Emily, the aftermath was a whirlwind. Her mother hugged her tightly, tears streaming down her face. "You did right, Em. I'm proud of you. We all are." Emily smiled through her exhaustion. The headlines didn't matter. The whispers didn't matter. What mattered was the way Lightning looked at her now, full of trust and hope and something like triumph. In the quiet that followed the chaos, Emily sat in the barn with Piper and Nico, watching Lightning doze in the straw. The three of them shared leftover fairground corn dogs and talked about what might happen next. Piper leaned back and looked at Emily. "You know what? You changed things. Even if they don't throw Victor out, you showed everyone that the truth matters, and that courage matters. I think the whole town's going to see you differently now." Emily looked at her friends, her family, and the horse who'd started it all, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she belonged, not just on the ranch, but in the world. That night, as the stars stretched across the Colorado sky, Emily whispered to Lightning, "We did it, boy. We really did." And Lightning, tired but safe, nickered softly, like he understood everything. The sun rose on a very different Grand Mesa fairground. The usual post-race hangover of exhaustion and relief was replaced by tension and murmurs. Emily woke with a knot in her stomach, the events of the day before swirling in her mind. The sabotage, the heartbreak, the stubborn pride of crossing that finish line. Lightning slept soundly in his stall, finally relaxed after the vet's care and a night of safety, but Emily hardly closed her eyes. By mid-morning, the race officials had gathered at the main office, their faces grim. One of them, A tall woman in a blue windbreaker came to the barn looking for Emily. She was accompanied by the vet and 2 local deputies. Piper, ever watchful, spotted them first and rushed to Emily's side. "They're here," she whispered. "I think this is it." Emily smoothed her tangled hair, trying to look braver than she felt. As the officials approached, she squared her shoulders, refusing to let her nerves show. Her mom arrived just in time, standing silently at Emily's side. Nico squeezed her hand, as if transferring every ounce of hope he had into her palm. The official introduced herself as Miss Martinez from the Grand Mesa Racing Board. Her voice was steady, professional. "Emily, we want to thank you for your patience. The test results confirmed what you suspected. Lightning was given ethyl carbamate, a banned nerve suppressant. This is a serious violation." Emily nodded, her throat tight. "I thought so. Someone tried to ruin his chance." Miss Martinez exchanged a look with the vet. "We don't take these things lightly. Thanks to your quick action and the statements from witnesses, including your friend Piper, we have enough to open a full investigation. You're not the only one." 2 other horses from small barns had suspicious symptoms. As the deputies took notes, Piper recounted seeing Victor's handler near the barn, while Ethan, Piper's brother, handed over a blurry cell phone photo of Victor's crew in the restricted area that night. The evidence was circumstantial, but compelling. Emily watched as Victor Langston arrived, flanked by his handlers and looking more annoyed than nervous. He tried to brush past Miss Martinez, but the deputy stepped in. "Mr. Langston, we'll need you and your staff to remain here for questioning," one deputy announced. The news spread quickly. Whispers turned to open conversations, riders and parents gathering in tight knots, rehashing the race, arguing about fairness and old grudges. Emily felt eyes on her everywhere she went. This time, though, the looks were different. Curious, sympathetic, even admiring. In the afternoon, the vet came to check on Lightning. She smiled at Emily. "He's recovering well. It'll take a few days for the suppressant to leave his system, but he's strong. You took good care of him." Emily stroked Lightning's mane. "He deserves better than what happened." "You both do," the vet replied. Later that day, a reporter from the local paper arrived, camera slung over one shoulder. She asked Emily for an interview, and though she was nervous, Emily agreed. Piper and Nico flanked her, providing moral support. The reporter asked, "How did it feel to cross that finish line after everything?" Emily took a breath, searching for the right words. "I was scared for Lightning, but I knew he wanted to run. He's got a bigger heart than people realize. I didn't care about winning. I just wanted to finish it together. That's what mattered." Nico piped up. "And she didn't let the cheaters win?" The reporter smiled. "What would you say to other kids who feel like the underdog?" Emily hesitated, then said, "Don't let anyone decide what you or your horse can do. Believe in each other. Sometimes the most broken horses carry the strongest hearts." The interview ran in the evening news. By dinner time, messages poured in. Old friends, distant cousins, even ranchers who'd never spoken to the Reyes family before. Some offered congratulations. Others shared their own stories of tough breaks and comebacks. A few apologized for doubting her, saying they'd never root for Victor Langston again. Victor, meanwhile, was in trouble. The racing board held a press conference confirming a formal investigation and immediate suspension for Victor's crew. 2 ranch families who had previously trained with him pulled out of his program, disgusted by the scandal. Even some of Victor's old friends distanced themselves, leaving him isolated on the edge of the fairgrounds. For once, he didn't have a smirk or a comeback. At home, Emily's family felt the shift too. Her mom was invited to talk on a local radio station, sharing her side of the story, about a daughter who wouldn't give up, a family who stood by each other, and a horse who proved that money can't buy heart. Emily blushed, listening to her mom's voice on the air, tears welling up as she realized just how far they'd come together. That night, Piper and Ethan joined Emily and Nico in the barn for a quiet celebration. Piper brought soda and leftover pie. Ethan brought a portable speaker, and Nico insisted on making a champion's crown from old feed bags and baling twine. Lightning wore it patiently, munching on apple slices as the friends laughed and told stories by lantern light. They didn't talk about the future yet, about races to come or what might happen to Victor. For one night, it was enough just to be together. Safe and proud, the weight of fear and shame finally lifted. As the lanterns burned low, Emily sat beside Lightning, head resting on his neck. "You showed them, boy," she whispered. "You showed me too. I thought we had to win to matter, but you proved we just had to try." Lightning blinked, his breath soft and warm. Outside, the ranch was still and peaceful, the world full of possibility again. Before she turned in for the night, Emily scrolled through messages on her phone. Well wishes, invites to train with other underdog riders, a message from a local gear shop offering to sponsor her for the next season, and even a tentative email about a youth scholarship. She hardly dared to hope. But for the first time, the future looked bright. She glanced back at Lightning, sleeping under a patchwork blanket, and felt a fierce, quiet pride. The truth was out, the community had her back, and she'd earned something more lasting than any trophy. Respect and the freedom to dream again. In the silence, Emily whispered, "We're not done, Lightning. We're just getting started." And as the barn faded into darkness, hope rose with the dawn. By the next morning, Emily's world had turned upside down. She woke to her phone buzzing with messages, some congratulating her, others sharing encouragement or asking for interviews. The news headline, "Teen Rider Uncovers Race Sabotage," was everywhere, her face and Lightning's scarred muzzle, side by side, on the homepage of the local news app. Emily's stomach fluttered with disbelief and nerves. She dreamed about being noticed for her riding, but never imagined this was how it would happen. Still, there was something electric in the air that morning, a feeling Emily hadn't known in a long time. Pride, not just for herself, but for Lightning, her family, and their tiny ranch that had finally found its voice in the noise of Grand Mesa. She barely had time to process it before Piper and Nico came bursting into the kitchen, waving their phones. "You have to see this," Piper gasped, spinning her screen to show a video of Emily and Lightning crossing the finish line, the crowd on their feet, the commentator shouting about heart and courage. It was already making the rounds on social media, and people in town were reposting it, tagging their friends, adding captions like, "Real champions never quit." And this is why we love Cedar Creek. Even Emily's mom, always wary of too much attention, seemed lighter. She fixed pancakes for breakfast, humming as she flipped them. "Looks like you're famous now, Em. Folks at the diner keep asking when you'll bring Lightning by." Emily laughed. "If I get one more request for a selfie with him, he's going to start charging apples as an appearance fee." But the attention wasn't just about fame. It was changing things for the ranch. Before noon, Mrs. Callahan from the neighboring farm stopped by, her old pickup rattling to a halt by the barn. She carried 2 sacks of feed and a broad, approving grin. "Time to give you a real chance, Emily. You and Lightning can use our arena anytime you like. We've all seen what you can do. You shouldn't have to train in the dust anymore." It wasn't just Mrs. Callahan. Later that day, Mr. Lutz from the hardware store offered to repair the broken barn roof, free of charge. The local gear shop, inspired by the news, dropped off a box of new brushes, boots, and riding gloves with a handwritten note. "For the bravest rider in the horse, with the biggest ear per heart." Emily's mom just stared at the pile of gifts and shook her head, eyes shining. "People are good, Emily. They just needed to remember." The biggest change came when Emily checked her email and found a message from the Youth Riders Association. She read it twice before squealing and hugging Nico, so hard he yelped. "You've been selected for a youth scholarship," she read aloud, barely able to get the words out. "Free lessons, free entry fees for the next season, and sponsorship for your gear, if you want it." Piper did a little victory dance in the driveway, whooping at the sky. "Told you, You're a star now. But Emily shook her head, grounding herself. I'm not a star. I'm just lucky people gave us a second look. Piper grinned. That's all anyone needs. A second look and someone who believes in them. Nico, full of energy and ideas, took the opportunity to dream big. What if we start a horse camp here, Em, for kids like us? You could teach them how to ride, how to take care of horses, how to believe in themselves. Emily loved the idea instantly. She could picture it, kids running through the fields, brushing Lightning's mane, learning to ride on the same homemade track where she and Lightning had trained. Aye, for once the future felt wide open, not limited by money or fear. Within a week, the Reyes Ranch was buzzing with new life. Neighbors showed up with fence posts and paint, determined to help repair the paddocks. Mrs. Callahan brought her grandkids and 2 gentle ponies, eager to lend a hand. Piper organized the first Saturday Horse and Hope session, posting flyers at the diner, library, and feed store. On the day of the first camp, Emily looked out at the ragtag group of kids, some shy, some bold, all a little nervous, and felt tears prick her eyes. Lightning, freshly brushed and wearing his champion's crown made of old twine and ribbons, stood quietly as the children took turns petting him and feeding him apple slices. Nico played ringleader, showing off the barn and explaining the secret code for calming nervous horses. Emily led the group through their first lessons, starting with basics: how to approach a horse, how to offer a treat, how to read a horse's ears and eyes. She shared Lightning's story, from the dusty auction to the hardest days, to the moment he crossed the finish line at Grand Mesa. The kids listened, wide-eyed, as Emily spoke not about winning, but about not giving up. One girl, Haley, clung to her mom's hand at first, but soon found herself smiling as Lightning gently nuzzled her palm. Another boy, Max, shy and quiet, laughed out loud when Piper convinced him to join the parade of champions around the field. The camp became a weekly event. Kids who had never touched a horse before learned to groom, ride, and care for Lightning and his new barn friends. Parents volunteered too, baking cookies or helping mend fences. Emily watched the barn transform from a place of struggle and loneliness into one filled with laughter, hope, and possibility. One evening, after the last child had gone home, Emily stood by the fence with Piper and Nico, watching the sun dip below the mountains. "This was the best idea," Piper said. "You're giving people what you always needed, someone to believe in them." Emily nodded. "Lightning gave me that. It's only right I pass it on." Nico leaned his head on Emily's arm. "Do you think Dad would be proud?" Emily squeezed his hand. "I know he would. Not just because of the race, but because we didn't quit. Because we turned something hard into something good." News of the camp spread. Soon, Emily was getting messages from families in nearby towns, asking if they could bring their kids or even donate horses that needed a second chance. The Reyes Ranch, once nearly bankrupt and forgotten, had become a haven, a place where broken things and broken people could heal and find new purpose. Emily's mom watched it all with tears of joy. "You did this, Emily. You and that $50 horse." As Lightning galloped freely in the sunset, Nico and the kids cheering from the fence, and Emily knew that the race had changed everything, not just for her, but for the whole community. Together, they had found redemption, hope, and a reason to dream again. The seasons turned, and the valley shifted from gold to green to snow, and back again. The news cycle moved on, but the story of Emily and Lightning lingered, woven into the heart of Cedar Creek. The Reyes Ranch was no longer the quiet, forgotten place at the edge of town. Laughter echoed in the fields. Hoofbeats rang out on mornings and afternoons. The barn doors were open wider than ever before, and hope lived in the dust motes and sunlight that danced in the rafters. Lightning had become a legend, not just for what he did on race day, but for what came after. Each week, kids gathered at the ranch, some clumsy and scared, some bold and bursting with energy, all drawn to the chestnut horse with the wise, gentle eyes. Emily guided them, showing how to trust, to listen, to try, even when it felt impossible. Sometimes she'd catch her own reflection in Lightning's glossy coat and see the girl she'd been, uncertain, desperate, but stubborn enough to keep going. She loved that Lightning was living proof. It's not the trophies you win, but the hearts you reach. The scholarship allowed Emily to travel beyond Cedar Creek, attending clinics and competitions with other young riders who knew what it meant to be underestimated. She always returned to her roots, to Lightning and the camp, sharing new skills, new stories. The ranch was thriving in a way it never had, thanks to neighbors who had seen what belief could do and were determined to keep it alive. One bright Saturday, under the blue sweep of a Colorado sky, Emily hosted the first end-of-season Parade of Champions. The kids decorated Lightning with braids and ribbons, Nico fashioned medals out of painted wood, and even the ponies wore their own crowns of wildflowers. Families gathered by the fence, cheering as each young rider took a turn leading Lightning around the paddock. No one cared who finished first. Every face shone with a thrill of trying. Later, as the sun sank low, Emily took a quiet walk with Lightning to the far fence line, just the two of them. She rested her hand on his neck, feeling the steady rhythm of his breath. For a moment she let the memories flood back, the fear at the auction, her mother's angry words, the humiliation in town, the dark night before the race, the fierce leap at the finish line. The moment she'd realized the only thing she needed to prove was to herself. She looked up at the sky, the clouds painted gold and rose. "You showed me what it means to fight for something you love," she whispered. "You showed the whole world." Lightning turned his head, brushing her shoulder with his muzzle. She smiled, remembering all the times she'd whispered secrets to him in the dark, hopes she barely dared to speak aloud. Back at the barn, Nico and Piper organized the kids for one last group photo. Lightning standing front and center, still wearing his medal and ribbons. The photographer asked everyone to smile, but Emily just laughed, unable to keep her heart from overflowing. After the photo, Emily knelt by Lightning's head, surrounded by the kids. She spoke quietly, but her words carried. A lot of people only see the winner. But sometimes, the bravest thing is to keep going, even when everyone says you shouldn't. That's what Lightning taught me. He didn't need to cross the line first, he just needed to cross it with me. Nico tugged at her sleeve. "Tell the story again, Em. The one about the auction." Emily grinned. "Okay. Once there was a girl who spent her last $50 on a horse no one wanted." The children leaned in, hanging on every word. Parents listened too, their faces soft, with memories of their own risks and dreams. Piper winked at Emily from across the circle, and her mom watched with tears in her eyes. As dusk settled over the ranch, Emily led Lightning out to the open pasture. She released the lead, and Lightning took off in a free, joyful gallop, his coat shining red gold in the last light of day. Nico and the other children cheered from the fence and waving their arms, chasing after dreams that felt suddenly within reach. Emily stood by the rails, heart full. Piper slipped an arm around her shoulder. You know, you changed this place. You changed a lot of us." Emily nodded, watching Lightning run. I think he changed me first. I just hope I can give that to others now." A few minutes later, her mom joined her, quiet and proud. "I was wrong, Emily, about what we could afford. Turns out, you can't put a price on believing in someone." Emily hugged her, tears springing to her eyes. "We got lucky, Mom, but we also fought for it." They stood in silence, watching as Lightning slowed, then circled back to the fence. Emily reached out, letting him nuzzle her palm. She knelt close and whispered, "They saw you win, but I saw you try. That's what matters more." Lightning nickered softly, as if in answer. As night settled, the ranch lights flickered on, illuminating a scene of new beginnings, families together, children laughing, horses grazing in peace. Emily knew challenges would come again, but she also knew she'd face them with courage, hope, and the quiet strength she'd learned from Lightning. The story would spread, as all good stories do. Kids would tell their friends, parents would remember the lesson, and somewhere, another underdog would get a second chance. Maybe that was the real prize. Knowing your fight, your hope, your stubborn refusal to give up could light the way for someone else. Before bed, Emily wrote one last line in her journal, words she hoped would live longer than any ribbon or trophy. You don't need to win to be a champion. Belief is the fuel no one can tamper with. Sometimes the most broken horses carry the strongest hearts. She closed her journal, heart at peace, and turned out the light. In the quiet of the barn, Lightning rested, a legend not for being fastest, but for never giving up. And outside, in the Colorado night, hope galloped free.